consortium that we created for COVID was, when we mapped the entire research to product, value chain, we realized that while we invested a lot in many of the laboratory research groups in the industries, in our manufacturing capacity, there were still gaps. Like animal models, our research institutes had to only wait for models to come in from overseas. Within the country, we did not have animal models. So we created those facilities to be able to make animal models available. We set up biorepositories to the samples. We created a whole network of clinical trial sites. We also realized that there would be multiple vaccine trials that would be held within the country, and that required not only clinical trial sites, but also required immunogenicity labs, and we created those labs. That network is now available for us. And I think from connecting globally groups to groups within the country, having very, very strong collaborative networks, from connecting the data that was available amongst all these groups, sharing networks, we've set up the National Biological Data Center now, which is now positioned at RCB in Faridabad. This common pool of resources, the seamless connections that we did from research laboratory to startup to industry, everyone came together. I think that is the response that we need for One Health. Complete self-reliance. I mean, we couldn't really have self-reliance diagnostic in 60 days if we didn't have such a well-organized framework in place. So why do we have to wait for a COVID or a pandemic to respond? It was this group which came out, let's do it for a mission like One Health. How did we do it? It was actually all hands on deck. Anyone who could do anything to respond to COVID came forward. Each one wanted to be, if I can use that word, a foot soldier in that war that we fight. And I think that's really what we do. We really need to sound the what we do for One Health now. For all the investors who are in this group today, funders, government agencies, we need to invest in high-risk research. We need to connect our basic translational, clinical and implementation research in the area of One Health. Believe me, to start documenting it, you'll realize that a lot is happening, but we're not connected it. We need to create those, connect those dots and create that robust ecosystem. We need to continuously keep fueling that innovation pipeline. And Dipangata and this whole IKP One Health incubator is going to be a wonderful example, because I know you've got global connection. And if it's One Health, it has to be one world. It cannot be India, Southeast Asia, Europe, US. No, it has to be a one world that we look at. Global access to resources. Let's make it a common framework. How did it work in COVID again and go back to it? Basically accelerated. It brought in the diagnostic thing, it brought in the vaccine. Today created those multiple sites for manufacturing. The vaccines, we are looking at industries now sharing their technologies in different countries and creating those manufacturing hubs. That's what we need. If we have to develop vaccines for AMR, if you look at diagnostics, if you look at therapeutics, if you look at new antibiotics. So it's all about communicating what the issue is to the public, collaborating with each other, and more importantly, converging. We need to converge at one point to the common goal. We need to launch, and maybe this could be a point to launch that global One Health consortium, which has a common goal, a common objective, a common vision. We need to, in that sense, prioritize what really our research is. There are competing, things for the finances. So how do you compete in that and say, we are a priority? But more importantly, with this group that we have here today, please draw up an excellent framework for a PPP model where the researchers in the academia, the clusters, and today we have such wonderful examples of clusters. We had our Bangalore cluster and Faridabad clusters which were functional and they responded. But today we have the Hyderabad cluster, you have clusters of incubation centers. Those need to respond and to see how we can come up. And I think what is most important is that do not stop your focus on fundamental research, because that pipeline has to come. So thank you all very much. I would just like to conclude by saying that this forum today should actually be the point where you look at giving out a call to action to accelerate progress in all countries, collaborate for more effective action, but more importantly, invest in One Health, because we are then investing for a sustainable future. And for that secure future, please, my only vision here is, let's not stop innovating. If you stop innovating, then who really is going to, and not just this group, you have to look at your connected network to be able to say, we need to innovate for a sustainable future, and One Health is our priority to take it up. So thank you all very much. It's been wonderful. I wish I was with you to have more discussion, but thank you all. Thank you so much.
So Dr. Swaroop, as always, it's really motivational and inspirational to hear from you about, especially about, for me personally, for One Health, but it's really wonderful. Thank you for beautifully taking us to the next keynote as well as to the panel discussion. I think you've beautifully set the stage for that. So I thank you for your time, and if you have the time, we would really appreciate if you could please attend the entire the next keynote and the panel discussions. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you all, and yes, I will attend it. I had promised the panel for about an hour or so more, so I will be around.
That's lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So before I move to our next keynote speaker, he is uniquely qualified. He's an economist and an epidemiologist. He's the founder and director of One Health Trust and director of the World Health Organization Collaborating Center for AMR. Please welcome Dr. Ramanan Lakshminarayan, on Science and Technologies, Antimicrobial Resistance Working Group. Over to you.
Months ago, so a pitch for this podcast, which actually covers a whole bunch of things related to One Health, which you might find of interest, which came out from the One Health Trust. So let me see if I can make this stuff happen. So I'm going to our thread through this talk as well, but the broader concept of One Health, I feel like, yes, it's now, we renamed as a One Health Trust a few years ago, but it's gained even more currency now. But this whole idea that we're all connected is not such a new idea at all. It's been around for thousands of years. In fact, this was the predominant paradigm. This is Chief Seattle, after whom Seattle, the city, is named, saying, we're all part of the same thread, and we're just one strand in that thread. And I think what we need to do is figure out exactly what we can do in order to understand that place, and then figure out what we as people who innovate or do research can help as part of this. Now, what Chief Seattle basically said is really what you now see in these very fancy sort of diagrams, which connect human, animal, and environmental interfaces, particularly with food production, with our link to wildlife and the connectedness there, and of course to us, to companion animals. And we share a lot. We live in a world of we live in a world of bacteria, in the sense that we're fish swimming in worlds of bacteria and viruses. There is no separation between us. We're all in the same soup, so to speak. And as part of this is really the fact that there are more of us. The global population is set to increase, grow at least 50% from 2000 to 2050. It should start declining by 2080. But it just means that the opportunities for this interface are far greater now than they ever were. Now, if you take the global biomass, and there's a very nice paper on this in PNAS from a few years ago, but if you take just the mammalian biomass, just of mammals, humans constitute about 36% of that biomass. Another 60% is the animals that well, not all of us, some of us are vegetarian, but we as a collective, human, race eat. And that's a considerable amount of, all of those are basically cattle and pigs, mostly pigs, and most of those pigs happen to be in China. So the biomass of poultry, which obviously is not mammalian, is about 3 times higher than that of wild birds. Everything else is in that last 4%. And so we have taken over the planet in a big way. So One Health is far more meaningful as a concept today than it even was when Chief Siap was talking about it, because there wasn't as much of the mammalian biomass. It was just concentrated around us as a species. Today, it's all concentrated around us as a species. If you look at global distributions of cattle, pigs, chickens, and ducks, you again see that it's not just the world. You particularly see places in India. So you take cattle. I don't know how many of you know this, but India has more cattle than China, the European Union, and the United States put together. How many of you knew this? Okay, that's about 2 people in the room at the back. And if Sindhura were here, you would have known that as well. Yes, so that's most of the cattle in the world that are actually here. Right? So those opportunities for intersect us. And you can see that also in these pictures. Now, why chickens? Now, chickens we don't actually consume. Pigs we don't have a whole lot of. Chickens we're starting to have a lot more of those. Right? And I'll show you that in the next slide, and of course ducks as well. Now, current protein demand for the inhabitants of the world is about 202 million tons. But since then, meat production is sort of capping off in high-income countries, but is really taking off in LMICs. So when you talk of One Health, it's not some abstract concept somewhere else. It is this stuff. We're raising a lot more meat. It's happening right next to us. And the potential for disease is much greater. Potential for antimicrobial resistance is much greater. It's happening right next to us. So demand for poultry in India is set to grow 7-fold between 2000 and 2030. It's already grown by a considerable amount in China. In fact, pig production in China went up 6-fold just between 1980 and about 2005. But we're going through that same ramp up in poultry consumption. A lot. Now, one of the ways in which we can look for risk is really also related to sewage surveillance, which has now become very popular during COVID. In fact, it was first started for antimicrobial resistance. And here we're looking for transmission of pathogenic bacteria between humans, between animals and humans. But we're also looking for uptake of new resistance factors. Now, that's more rare and more challenging to predict. But this, particularly in the Indian setting, is extremely common. In fact, in India, in the work that we have done, exposure to antibiotics as selection pressure is not the primary driver of resistance. It is exposure to resistant bacteria because of transmission, because transmission is so easy in the environment here, because of water, sanitation not being up to where it needs to be, we're all in close proximity, that